With me today, I have Alfredo Corchado, the Mexico
other
border.
Alfredo.
The other Alfredo, Alfredo Corchado, Mexico border correspondent of the Dallas Morning News, who's been covering the lead up to the Mexican election, July 1st, Mexico elects a new president. Alfredo, what's at stake in the Mexican election? What's the story there?
I think the story is third time's a charm for Andrés Manuel López Obrador.
Who is he?
Andrés Manuel López Obrador is a native of Tabasco, former mayor of Mexico City. He's known as more of a left-leaning populist candidate who's been able to build this incredible coalition around him. And the polls we've seen, the polls we've done at the Dallas Morning News in conjunction with UNT and Reforma, shows that he has a significant lead. I think the last poll we had was something like 52%. Anaya is in the 20s, as I recall. I think at the end it will be a much closer race. I mean, I think the numbers will come down. You know, in the polls, I interviewed a lot of people in Mexico, throughout Mexico. We went to Guanajuato, Jalisco, Michoacán, Ciudad Juárez. It's interesting, the number of people say, we're going to wait till the last minute. There's a rejection of the ruling party, the Institutional Revolutionary Party. There's a rejection of the PAN, the National Action Party, Conservative Party. So there's a sense that López Obrador, that the timing, the moment, may be right for him.
So you talk about the numbers from the polls, and it looks like all the polls are consistent in giving López Obrador the lead. What about the sentiments on the streets? When you talk to people, when you talk to businessmen, when you talk to the regular voter in Mexico, what are the issues?
I think what's driving this disenchantment, if you will, is, I mean, there are several factors, but among them, I think, is the security situation in Mexico. Mexico comes away from the worst violence
so
in
even though
history.
The current president, Enrique Peña Nieto, keeps on saying that the security situation has improved, is that the case or not?
Well, if you look at the numbers, 2017 was the worst year in Mexico. The first quarter of 2018 is 20% higher than a year ago. What's interesting, I think, is that it's no longer just the northern states that are feeling the sense of insecurity, the sense of violence, but it's throughout Mexico. One of the things I tried doing in this and the stories that we're doing and leading up to the election is try to visit with middle-class families in El Bajío, which is more of a prosperous region. And the sense, you know, from there was there's a rejection of the PAN. There's a rejection of the not on a statewide level, but when they look at the national elections, it's almost a sense of we want something new, and there's a sense of we can do better as a country. López Obrador is still very much the unknown candidate. I mean, because I don't know that we yet know what the plan is. What is his plan? And that's why I think, you know, there's going to be more of a strategic voting. You know, the big worry is, will López Obrador victory and let's say the rhetoric between Trump and López Obrador hits. I mean, will there be an anti-U.S. sentiment in Mexico? Will there be more of a nationalistic take? I think up to now, Mexicans have really restrained themselves. I mean, they've been pretty sophisticated in saying, this is President Trump, it's not necessarily the American people, but 6 years is a long time.
So let me pick up on that issue about the nationalistic sense. Mm-hmm. The obsession to López Obrador, they've been saying, even through social media and in their campaigning, some sort of warnings about what may happen with López Obrador. And it goes to the extreme of sometimes you see spots saying, beware, is Mexico the new Venezuela? Right. Or are we leading to a socialist, nationalistic government that will isolate themselves from this partnership that you're talking about in the integration in North America? Is there a risk for that? What's your assessment on it?
I don't know that I can give an example. I mean, I think that's part of the campaign by the opposition to try to generate fear, which we saw in 2006, we saw in 2012. I think at this point, at least as I talk to voters in Mexico, I think they, there's a sense that we've seen this movie before. So I'm not sure it's going to work at the end. I mean, and they're racking it up, that campaign. We're just days from the election. So I won't be surprised if it goes on to a new extreme. But I think Mexicans in the end will vote on matters of security, corruption, and the economy. I mean, the other thing we saw during this poll was the number of people who don't quite have yet to really quite embrace NAFTA. It's been good for Mexico. I think that's really the general feeling. But when you talk to a lot of Mexicans, especially at the beginning level in factories in the country, I mean, the wages haven't really changed much in 25 years. And so that's something to look at when you have a candidate like López Obrador saying, I'm going to double, I'm going to triple your wages.
So let's close this conversation with the question about what else can we expect on the poll that the Dallas Morning News, Reforma, and UNT Dallas conducted last month in Mexico. What else is coming? What other stories are you going to be working on?
I mean, I'm going to be looking at the sentiment across Mexico on feelings about the wall. And how they see migration. One of the questions I thought was an interesting question was, if you could legally migrate to the United States, would you do it? I mean, the key word is legally. And I mean, you can talk more about that. I mean, what were the numbers there?
Well, it was about 2/3 that they say that they will. No, actually, it was half of the poll. Half of the people that we poll said that they will not leave the country, which is a pretty drastic change compared to other polls that we've done, 6 years before that.
And that's also kind of a contradiction to when people say they're not happy with the wages. I mean, they may not be happy with the wages, but they're not necessarily desperate, itching to come to the United States. And that's something to kind of look at, because we are seeing less and less Mexicans coming across. I mean, there's about a million less Mexicans in the United States today. So that ties into Texas and other parts of the United States as we see more and more labor shortages. When you have only half of them saying we would cross legally, that has a lot of implications. And I think it also kind of revives the whole argument is, do we need a temporary worker program, much like a bracero program from the old days? I know bracero is not a very popular term, but I think Mexicans will probably, at least the ones I've talked to, will probably think twice about that if they could come to the United States legally for a few months and then go back home. That's also something that we will be looking at in the
So that seems to be a radical change from even previous polls that we've done, considering that about 1 of every 3 families in Mexico have somebody living in the United States.
Right.
The sentiments have shifted.
They've shifted, and at a time when when Mexicans are about to take a new direction on where the country's going, and what the country will look like in the next 10, 20 years.
All right. Well, thank you, Alfredo Corchado. You're going to have more stories in the next few weeks.
In the next few days.
In the next few days leading to the July 1st election.
Right.
And then after the election, those stories will be in English in Dallas Morning News and DallasNews.com, and in Spanish on Al Dia and AlDiaDallas.com.
Exactly.
Gracias.
Thank you.